Hello, team. In this episode, myself and Ant sit down to talk about our top 5 strategies to prepare for the CrossFit Open. It's not long now, so there's some things that you should be doing, and there's other things that you shouldn't. Join us for this episode to learn what those things are. And welcome to the Process Podcast. How you doing?
Happy New Year. I'm doing well, thank you.
Nice. Why are you doing well?
Happy to be back at work. Had a great, week and a half, just over a week and a half, break in Thailand with the family in Phuket, which was, it was very quiet. It was very relaxed. It was very much wake up without a schedule. Played lots of golf. My golf was complete crap. That doesn't matter though. It's still great to be out there. Spent a lot of time with family who are still over there. And of course, girlfriend and your wife is all good to have the extended family out as well, but back and ready to crush 2025. I'm a bit sore, haven't had much intensity or just training full start. My training took a bit of a backseat in Thailand, kept movement up, but yeah, I'm pretty sore right now, pretty beat up after 3 days of training, but yeah, good to be back.
Nice Or echo all of those thoughts. My training definitely, I think, took probably a bit more of a backseat than yours.
Yeah,
when we were over there, and my biceps today, just from doing those dumbbell snatches yesterday, like when your biceps are getting lit up from 50 dumbbell snatches
and a 15 kg.
Now it's 22 in the end. It was going to be 15. I thought, yeah, it's a bit pathetic. But yeah, also easing back into it, feeling the effects of taking it easy.
Yeah.
But feeling very mentally good. And ready for 2025.
Nice.
So speaking of 2025, and we're in January right now, and this is coming out on Monday, the drum roll 13th. For CrossFitters around the world, this marks a special time / terrible time in the calendar, because this normally means that it's time to start preparing and focusing a little bit more on the CrossFit Open. Now, when we say preparing, it doesn't mean that everything we've done before this isn't preparing for the CrossFit Open, but this is typically kind of that like home stretch where, we're 7 to 8 weeks away, and we typically, and perhaps the fact that it coincides with like New Year's resolutions, start of the new year, boozy, heavy Decembers, typically like people knuckle down at this time of the year. And start really thinking a little bit more about, getting their fitness to another level so that they can do their best in the CrossFit Open. So that's what this podcast is all about. We are going to share our top 5 tips and strategies to help people prepare for the 2025 CrossFit Open. So firstly, dates, and give us a bit of a rundown on what we have coming up this year.
Okay, so talking about the Open, the 2025 Open will start February 27th.
Pretty much the same as last year.
Yeah, it'll be 3 weeks and finish on March 17th. First workout will be March 3rd, next one March 10th, and last one March 17th will be the submission days for each of those. The announcement days will be 27th, March 6th, and March 13th. And then, of course, we have the rest of the season, but there's so much up in the air still right now that there's no point really talking about that just yet.
Yeah.
So those are the Open workouts. Of course, there might be more than 3, as in there might be like a 3.1, for example, where there might be like a double header to it, like the max thruster or the max complex that we've had in the past. But there's 3 weeks. Those are already in the diary, and I think those are set in stone.
Yeah, so this is now the 5th year since we moved to the new Open format. So the new Open format being just 3 weeks instead of 5. Other than that, there hasn't been any major changes. Also, the inclusion of multiple divisions now. Yeah. So previous Opens, it was kind of just scaled or RX. Now I've got multiple levels. And when that first got introduced, we were kind of thinking, well, is that going to mean that the RX division is now going to be even more complex? Because those who don't have complexity have other options where they can still get a good workout and be on a part of a competitive leaderboard.
Yeah.
But I think what we've actually seen is that the complexity of the Open workouts, at least over the last 4 years, which I think is what we should really focus on a little bit more, has actually probably kind of moved the opposite way. We've had previous years, like, really heavy loads in the Open, things like handstand walking, pistols, those movements haven't come up since we've moved to the new 3-week format. So I think when we talk about this, when we talk about how to prepare for the Open, but also, we're programming for many athletes through the process programming to prepare for the Open. we're typically thinking a little bit more about, let's feed off the trends of the last 4 years more so than the trends of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Is that something you think about as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think I think the movements are all still there, really. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think the weights probably come down a little bit more from that. The simplicity in how the workouts are built, it seems, as well. There's less like windows of time, which we've seen in the past, and just generally a bit more simple. It doesn't mean they're any easier though. But yeah, I agree.
Okay, let's go into our 5 top tips and strategies to help you prepare for the CrossFit Open between now and the Open. So, we're now talking about what can you do in the next, 5 to 7 weeks to ensure that you're setting yourself up for success when the CrossFit Open rolls around. And maybe that's a good place to start. Like, what success means to you might be very different to other people. For someone like yourself, and you're looking to lock in a top 1% spot so that you can then progress to semifinals, and your season is really just beginning with the CrossFit Open. For someone like myself, I might be thinking, well, if the workouts are in my favor, I might be able to qualify to the next stage, which is, the age group semifinals. But for most of us, the Open is kind of like the end of our season. We've got 3 weeks now to, take part in this big community event, do some hard workouts, benchmark ourselves against maybe previous selves if the workouts repeats, or benchmark ourselves against kind of the rest of the world. And then for most people, the season kind of ends there and we start rebuilding for 2025, 2026. Okay, so if you wanted to really focus on getting as fit to be able to, be the best version of yourself across the Open, then really your preparation needs to start way in advance. What we just talked about, when this Open finishes, we're going to start prepping for the 2025, 2026 season. That's really when the Open prep starts. It's 7 to 8 months out. And that's where we start following, a training program, which is progressively getting us to the point where we're going to be at our strongest physically and mentally for the Open. So just a reminder to folks out there, if you really want to be the fittest version of yourself for the Open, it takes, a big plan that is mapped out over 1 year or even multiple years, that is all building you towards this specific goal. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're just talking about the next 5 to 7 weeks.
And if you don't have that, then you sign up to the Process program.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about our first strategy, or our first tip, which is choose a sustainable training schedule. What do you think of when you hear this?
I think of my old self in school when I used to have an exam come up and I used to try and cram everything before it. I would still work. I would still go to the classes, and I would still learn some things, but maybe it wasn't the right things I should be doing. Maybe then when I get towards cramming, I just try and shove everything into that one night before. In this case, it would be probably 1 to 4 weeks before. And you just do everything, and you do everything at a really high intensity. And then you end up either getting injured, you either getting burned out, or you just, something silly happens, or you got nothing when it comes to the Open. So yeah, pick a schedule which is sustainable for you. I mean, I've made mistakes in the CrossFit space as well. Same. Like, I got to do well in the Open. Time to smash myself with 4 Open workouts, the style of Open workouts every single week leading up, and then get to the Open. Back then it was a 5-week Open, and just get to week 2 and 3 and be hanging on by the skin of my teeth. So yeah, sticking to something that's sustainable is definitely individual to each person. It's being smart with your training. Just because a training program you might be following asks you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. And then of course, like as we always say, listen to your body, listen to your mind. Are you ready to push? Because when you do have the hard workouts prescribed, you got to really try and give the intensity to it versus just doing the volume of it all the time. Bringing the intensity, getting used to that, and just doing enough to be ready for the Open.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that as well. When January rolls around, suddenly feeling like I haven't done enough, and I've got 5 weeks now to cram as much as I possibly can. And like you said, what actually ends up happening is that you do more volume and more intensity, you start to get more tired, more beat up. And then by the time the competition rolls around, you've just got nothing left to give. Your body isn't willing to give the 110% that we typically require from competition. And it's just doing just enough to get by. And then what typically happens, I get to week 2 or week 3 and I get sick. or I get through the Open and then all the sickness and the injuries kind of hit me all at once. So I think an important conversation to have though is what realistically can we do? Like what adaptations can we make in 5 to 6 weeks? Because I think that's an important conversation to have that I never really understood when I was younger. Because I thought, oh, I can add 20% to my back squat. I can get 50% fitter. I can learn all the skills in 4 to 5 weeks. It'd be no problem. And then I learned through experience that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think, when you look at the whole year, I won't go into massive depth about it, but generally speaking, off season, the reason why we want to use the off season to try and get strong, everyone always says it. What that actually means is up for discussion. But generally speaking, conditioning is down. We spend a lot of time trying to get strong, which is generally the hardest quality of fitness to try and, muster up and gain.
It takes the longest.
Takes a long time. The next thing would be, in a shorter window, you could probably improve a little bit of aerobic fitness. You can dose high intensity and make some adaptation and get used to that. Definitely within like this window now, you can get used to that. You can still get fitter, quote unquote, whatever that means to you. Strength is probably out the window at this point. You just need to maintain. But one thing you can definitely get better at is skills. And skills are not just double unders, bar muscle-ups. Got to do those skills. It's also the skill of competing. It's a skill of like transitions, all those small things that sometimes people might not think about. But like skills can just be intentions that you set in a workout and make sure you execute that, and then getting really good at doing that as well. A skill could also be doing a workout and analyzing it. Looking at it and saying, okay, if I were to do this again on a Sunday or Monday after the workout, after the first initial attempt or release of it, how could I go better? That's also a skill in itself, which actually requires zero physical effort. It's just a bit of breaking a mental sweat as well at the same time. But yeah, those are all things. So I would say aerobic fitness, you can definitely train a bit of intensity as well, like the high power output work, which you see in the Open sometimes, and also skills.
Yeah, I agree. Strength, at this point of the season, you kind of accept your level of strength and what you've built up, and really it's all about maintaining it. And when it comes to maintaining strength, a big part of maintaining strength is also just trying to stay healthy. A lot of people, when they start overtraining and doing too much, they feel like their strength suddenly drops by 20%, but often that's not so much the fact that you've lost the strength. It's just your body's so depleted and fatigued that it's not able to express it. And then often in those cases, a couple of rest days, you can come back, oh, my strength's still there. So if you are experiencing that, you suddenly feel that, wow, in 2 weeks, my strength is suddenly gone. Realistically, it hasn't. It's still there. Your body's maybe just not in an optimal state to express it. But 100% skills, putting in dedicated time and focus and energy on improving your efficiency with everything. Because remember, the more efficient you can be in every single repetition, the less work you're doing per rep. And the less work you're doing per rep, the faster you can complete workouts, or the more repetitions you can complete in an AMRAP. So it's the easiest way to get fitter or get a better score in the CrossFit Open is just to be as efficient as you possibly can with each movement. And then, like you said, yes, conditioning capacity, that can definitely improve in 5 to 6 weeks. And I think as well, just being able to get used to that level of intensity and your body adapting to multiple pieces of intensity in a week is also something you can definitely make adaptations to in a short period of time. So I think the biggest takeaway here is that you know your body best, and it's really important that you pick a training schedule that fits with what you know you can consistently stick to over the next 5 to 6 weeks, and your body can handle. Because remember, there's no point in doing all the training if your body can't recover from it, right? We're only as good as our recovery. So if that means that up until this point in time, you've been doing 3 sessions a week, and that's what works best for your schedule, stick with 3 sessions a week. And just maybe focus a little bit more on, bringing some intensity to those sessions and recovering hard. If you're currently doing 3 sessions a week, and that's what you've been doing for the last 6 weeks, and you suddenly increase it to 6 sessions a week, it's a lot. That's an 100% increase in volume and intensity that you're asking your body to do. It's probably not going to end up well. You're probably going to have a really rough few weeks where your body tries to adapt to that. And whether you actually adapt in time before the CrossFit Open, I mean, that's just another question. So anything to add?
No, I think that's it.
Perfect. So just in terms of your training schedule, What's that looking like now between the Open, between now and the CrossFit Open? Are you going to be changing anything from what you've been doing? A very quick break from this episode to talk about our sponsors, FETAC. FETAC have an awesome training shoe, the All Move 3. It's a very versatile shoe and it's unbelievably comfortable. I've been using this shoe now for the last 4 months, and honestly, it has smashed every other training shoe I have used out of the water. And we have a unique discount code for the process. If you enter the process at checkout, you will receive a 20% discount. So head over to fetac.com and get your shoes now.
Well, I know on the process anyway, we generally do a hard workout around a Friday, Saturday time anyway. Personally, for me, I think I'm going to wait a couple more weeks, hopefully just one more week, to see what happens with the CrossFit Games rulebook, see what that 1% looks like. If that 1% is like really squeezed and it's like 1% of the world in the Open, then that's different to being 1% of your region. So I will see if it's 1% of region. I'll leave my schedule as it is. I'll still train twice a day. I'll do the workout on a Friday morning, and then I'll train in the rest of the day. And I hope my single effort will get me through, unless I completely bomb one. I have to do it again. But if it's 1% of the world, then I'm probably gonna have to be changing my schedule to allow me to execute one on a Friday and then one on either Sunday or Monday, to give myself the best shot to go through. So kind of waiting at the moment. Just over the last few days, a few things have come out on Instagram, and that's about it. We won't get into that, but still waiting to see what the rulebook says, really.
Nice.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm going to really change anything. I think leading the last quarter of last year, because I did the Asia Fitness Championships, I really made sure that I trained 5 days a week and I brought intensity to those sessions.
Yeah.
I have had a bit of a deload phase probably for the last couple of weeks, but my goal is to get back to that as well. Whether I do my CrossFit Open workouts on a Saturday with the group classes here at Coastal, or I do it on a Friday with the coaches, I'm not really sure just yet.
Yeah.
Probably need to make a decision on that in the next couple of weeks, because if I decide to do it on a Saturday, then I'll continue to just follow our Saturday, do our Saturday testers and make that the most intense workout of my week. If I decide to do the open workouts on a Friday, then I'll probably move my Saturday tester to a Friday and then do my Friday session on a Saturday. Yeah. So you're just speaking about this now, I probably need to make that decision soon.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So there you have it. Number 1 is choose a sustainable training schedule. Number 2, practice the movements. What do we mean by this?
This could be for a lot of people just a wild stab in the dark and just trying to remember what they've done over the last few years, remember which movements they are worst at. So, I was so terrible when the bar muscle up came up. I just couldn't do the bar muscle up. So I'm just going to try to do bar muscle ups for the next 6 weeks and just get a bar muscle. That's my goal. Or you can take a data-oriented approach and you can actually look at, again, what we're speaking about the last 4 to 5 years, where it's been a 3-week open, and actually have a look at what movements have come up over those few years, whether it's been 3 or 4 workouts, and make a slightly more educated guess. It's not a definite, it's definitely not, but you can definitely make a more educated guess based on previous trends on the movements that have come up.
Okay, I'm going to test your knowledge now, Anne.
God.
Okay, so I have here the most frequently tested movements in the CrossFit Open, and I have 2 different tables. My first table is from 2011 to 2020, which is when the Open was a 5-week format. And then my second table is from 2021 to 2024, the last 4 years, where it's been a 3-week format. Okay. So
I'm definitely gonna get this wrong. But
we're just gonna go with the top 5 most frequently tested movements in order. So I want you to start with the most frequently tested movement, the movement that showed up the most, and work your way down to spot number 5. So we're gonna talk from 2011 to 2020. Which movement do you think showed up the most?
Is it? Oh God. Was it double unders?
Incorrect.
Is it up there?
It's up there.
Okay, let's just go with the top.
Let's just go. Okay, in the top 5.
Okay,
double unders. Correct.
Toes to bar.
Correct.
Pull up.
Chest to bar pull up. I'll give you
counts. Yeah. Thruster.
Correct.
Last movement. Oh God. A burpee.
Muscle up.
A muscle up.
Ring or bar.
Okay, right, yeah.
Okay. Well done.
Where was it with burpees? Did you have that? No.
Burpees is on there.
Close.
Just outside the top 5.
Okay.
So what we also did before this podcast is we looked at the movements tested since it's been a 3-week open.
Yeah.
I have the table in front of me.
Yeah.
With the movements from most tested to least. I want to hear your top 5. Go.
When I say if it's muscle up, is it ring and bar?
Ring and bar. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with dumbbell snatch.
In 5th spot, the dumbbell snatch.
Yeah, working from my bottom up.
Nice.
Good. There must be double unders in there.
Yep. That's top spot. Well, shared tied top. It's been tested every single year, the double under, since we moved to a 3-week format.
Pull up, a chest to bar or pull up.
Nope, did not make the top 5. Well, technically tied with 3. Yeah, it showed up 3 times. The chest to bar showed up 3 years.
Yeah,
out of the 4.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Pretty good. I'll give you that half point.
There's a walk in there.
There are 3 movements that have showed up every year over the last 4 years. Double under is one. You got that already.
Muscle up.
Correct.
Yeah. Thruster.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so the top 5 movements, in fact, because over the last 4 years, the double under, thruster, and bar muscle up, or muscle up, I should just say, have been programmed every single year.
Yeah.
And then these following movements have showed up in 3 out of 4 years: the wall walk, dumbbell snatch, the deadlift, the clean, and the chest to bar.
Yeah.
So the biggest, what's a one movement there? There are the 2 movements there that stick out that weren't previously tested.
As in the dumbbell snatch
and a wall walk.
Yeah.
So those are 2 movements. I mean, I know the single dumbbell, well, dumbbell's only something that came in kind of in later years, but the dumbbell snatch has now been a pretty frequently tested movement. And I'm actually quite surprised to see that the wall walk was tested in 3 out of the 4 years.
Yeah.
So the reason we're talking about this kind of stuff is if you are now preparing for the CrossFit Open, like you said, taking more of a data-driven approach to deciding where you should be spending your energy and time makes sense. So we know, for example, that the assault bike is not a required piece of equipment that's going to show up in the CrossFit Open. So therefore, spending lots of time doing assault bike work is probably not the most bang for your buck in terms of what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Also, in terms of running, we know that the only form of running that might show up could be a shuttle run because, long distance runs or assault runners are probably not going to show up as well.
Yeah.
Handstand walking, for example, in previous years was a skill that we really encourage athletes to train for the Open. But in the last 4 years, it hasn't shown up. Now, does that mean it's not going to show up? I don't know. I'm not sure. But, if we place our bets based on what history tells us, spending time working on handstand walks might not be the best return on investment for our time.
Yeah.
So what we really recommend you guys do if you're prepping now is to look at those lists and really make sure that at the very least you're including, the most frequently tested movements in your training every single week. At least every single week. Maybe there's some movements that, need even more time and attention, and you increase the frequency of those movements to maybe a couple of times a week. Also really depends just how challenging that movement is. If it's something like a heavy clean that you struggle with, well, you can't really be doing multiple sessions of heavy cleans in the week. But if it's double unders and that's more of a skill limiter, like you just haven't developed the technique to be able to link them consistently, that's probably something that you can do multiple times a week and it won't be too damaging on your body.
Yeah, I think other things to think of is like something like a dumbbell snatch for a lot of people is quite daunting in this scenario because often we've been tested with over 100 reps of a dumbbell snatch within a workout and people just complain about their backs blowing up. Backs blowing up is the main thing. So again, just prescribing someone with 100 dumbbell snatches every week is not the way, or not necessarily the only way to get better at it. You can still do plenty of hinging movements. You can work on your hinging mechanics. You can do Russian swings. You can do work on your compression drills, work on your hip flex. There's loads of things you can still do versus just doing the one movement over and over and over again. Yes. There's also going to be different combinations of things that you're going to have to do as well. So I think people sometimes get caught in that trap of that's a movement, I have to do that movement. If your movement pattern sucks for that movement, like you said, if you just work on efficiency in the pattern, then already you're going to get better at it versus just doing hundreds and hundreds of reps over and over again.
And I think that's a good point. And I think also just reminding people that it doesn't always have to be in a workout either.
Yeah.
Right. You know, you can do EMOMs or even just isolating the movement, doing a few reps of it, filming yourself, watching your videos back, seeing if there's any areas that you can improve technique or efficiency, doing different variations of the movement. So for example, the dumbbell snatch, you know, doing a dumbbell snatch where you're playing with the different changeover techniques. You're sometimes pausing on the floor, sometimes you're changing at the shoulder, practicing a power snatch variation where you're dipping in the catch, playing with, you know, a pronated versus a neutral grip. There's lots of different variations you can do, and it's all going to help you at the end of the day get better at snatching.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice. I think also incorporate that into your programs. If you're someone who, let's say, follows a program like the Process programming, where you have kind of your template written out for you every single week, but you know there's some movements that you want to give some extra love to, or, you know, incorporate into your training a bit more, kind of adding them into your warm-ups or at the end of your training sessions, just, you know, not necessarily in a conditioning based setting, but just touching on the movement, you know, adding a light dumbbell snatch into your warm-ups, you know, 3 times a week could be a really good way for you to build confidence with the movement, work on technique, and still get some volume in without, you know, crushing your body.
For sure.
Awesome. Okay. That's strategy tip number 2, is practice and focus on the movements that are most likely to show up in the CrossFit Open. Moving on to number 3. Number 3 is prioritize conditioning. What are your thoughts on this?
I think for the majority of people, yes, for sure. For some people who are savagely fit, and they know the Open is something that they can get through, then maybe it might not be the case. But I think for the majority in the mass population, yes, I think it's true. Again, we spoke about it at the beginning. You can definitely still make meaningful adaptations within the realm of like energy system fitness. So, you know, working from the aerobic spectrum all the way through to like hard effort, high intensity sprint work, for like, you know, lack of a different term. But yeah, you can definitely make a lot of adaptations still in there. You can definitely understand yourself as well, just like you do with strength work. You know, roughly speaking, what your 1 rep max is, what your 5 rep max is on a back squat or a deadlift. You can definitely start to understand and piece those pieces of the jigsaw together a little bit better when it comes to your ability to work on conditioning work. Like, how many toes to bar can I hit under fatigue? How many double unders can I do before I should take a break so I can stay sustainable in a work? You can practice different combinations, double unders with a burpee, double unders with toes to bar, double unders with dumbbell snatches. How does it feel? And you can start to piece the pieces of the jigsaw together, which again, often at the beginning part of the off season where you're working on so much strength, you don't really get as many touches on quote unquote CrossFit, where it's a bit chaotic. There's a lot going on and you're breathing super heavy. So yeah, just exposing yourself to that, you can still make a lot of meaningful adaptations between now and the Open.
Yeah. Nice. I think you're right. It really depends upon the individual. If someone has a really well developed aerobic system already, it might be within their interest to still prioritize a bit more strength work, knowing that that's going to set them up for a better CrossFit Open. Because if their strength continues to they start to lose more strength, then potentially not going to get their conditioning any better because it's already so elite that it makes sense to do less of that because it's already great, and, you know, up different areas of the game. So, but I think for the majority of people, creating some form of bias in your programming to make sure that there's a bit more conditioning or more focus, certainly to what you've previously been doing on developing your engine, would be a really good idea. And when we look at the energy systems, or at least on a more simple way to look at it, the time domains that are typically tested in CrossFit Open, we're really talking about 6 to 20 minutes. That's where we want to be really good. You know, getting good at doing 40-minute workouts, whilst that's fantastic, is probably going to get you aerobically fitter in the long term and it builds a great base. In the next 6 to 7 weeks, don't spend copious amount of time doing 40-minute workouts. Spend a little bit more time doing interval-based work, or, you know, simulations of 6 to 20-minute workouts, because that's what you're going to need to be really, really good at. I think so creating some form of bias, maybe it's like a 60-40 or a 70-30 bias towards conditioning would be a good idea. But I think as well, we've talked about this already and mentioned it, it's just that doesn't mean you have to smash yourself every day, and it also doesn't mean that you have to be doing conditioning work every single day. So if you're training 5 days a week, maybe if we're trying to create a bias towards conditioning, having 3 of those days be more conditioning based and having 2 of those days being a bit more strength based would create a good bias, and it ensures that you're not just doing hard conditioning every single day. Or another way to do it is if you're training 6 days a week, perhaps you have, 2 strength days and then 3 conditioning. No, that doesn't work out. You might even have, for example, rather than thinking about pure strength and pure conditioning days, you might have 3 days which are strength and conditioning based, and then you might have 2 days which are just conditioning based. There's lots of different ways that you can work it, but making sure that there is a bit more of an emphasis towards conditioning work. I would just say as well with that, make sure you're not doing multiple days of back to back to back really hard sessions, because that's also going to be really hard for you to recover from. When we do these hard intensity pieces, we're trying to replicate the intensity of the CrossFit Open, and that's pretty tough on the body. And so making sure you're giving yourself at least the training stimulus day to day is changing. So maybe you're doing, hard conditioning work on a Monday, and you're doing a bit more strength and skill work on a Tuesday, getting back to some moderate intensity conditioning on a Wednesday, and then maybe Thursday or Friday is again a bit more strength and skill based. And then you're kind of rotating through that kind of schedule would be a really good way to ensure you don't burn out, you don't pick up injuries and illnesses before the Open.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, I guess just going back to what we spoke about with schedule as well is again, picking the days that you think you're going to do the Open on, whether that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, and then putting those hardest workouts on those days as well. So trying to prep yourself for that as well. So just tying the two together.
I wanted to quickly interrupt this episode with a quick shout out to our sponsors, Today Well Spent. I've been using this journal for 2 years, and it has made a massive impact on my physical, but mostly my mental well-being. It is a guided journal backed by neuro and behavioral science, which I actually didn't know at the time. It has questions for you to answer at the start of the day, at the end of the day, end of every week, end of every month. And it's brought so much self-awareness to me of the things that positively and negatively impact my life. So if you're someone who cares about your physical and your mental well-being, which I think you do because you listen to this podcast, then go and grab yourself a Today Well Spent. Use the discount code THEPROCESS, one word in capitals, to get your discount. I would just add on top of this as well is we've already talked about the movements that are going to be showing up in the Open. I think it's also important to think about the combinations of movements, because when we talk about conditioning, that can mean so many different things in CrossFit. It can be, just monostructural conditioning where we're just doing rowing based intervals, or it can be thrusters and pull-ups. When we're prescribing or programming Metcons, we still class it as a conditioning session, but we're using weightlifting and gymnastics movements. So things that I like to think about when I'm programming people for the CrossFit Open or preparing people for the Open is looking at the combinations that have showed up in previous years that I know CrossFit likes to combine. So for example, we've seen thrusters and chest to bars or thrusters and bar muscle ups programmed a lot. That's probably one of the most common movements that we've seen. We've also seen thrusters and burpees programmed quite a lot. Toes to bars and cleans, ring muscle ups with wall balls and double unders. That seems to be a really popular combination. Or rowing and wall balls, that shows up a lot as well. Wall walks, double unders has come up a lot. Deadlift, handstand push up. That's like one of the classic combinations that we see in the sport. So I think, again, when it comes to your conditioning work, not only thinking about the movements that might show up, not only thinking about the time domains that you need to be practicing, but also thinking about the combinations of movements that might potentially show up. I just kind of want to add one more layer to that. What the Open also does like to do, we've seen it less since it's moved to the 3-week format. We saw it more in the 5-week format, was non-complementary movement pairings. So what we mean by that is that, let's say, combining 2 to 3 movements where it's challenging the same muscle group. So workouts that immediately jumped to mind, I think it was 2 years ago, we had wall walks, double unders and snatches. And then it went to strict handstand push-ups, double unders and snatches. So very shoulder heavy, going from strict handstand push-ups into heavy snatches is quite challenging on the overhead. And that would be what we call a non-complementary movement pairing. Something that's a complementary movement pairing would be something like a thruster and a pull-up. A thrust is, quads and upper body pressing, and then the pull up is more upper body pulling. So kind of challenging different muscle groups. So I think doing lots of non-complementary movement pairings in your programming is pretty tough, because it's going to really destroy a muscle group or a set of joints. So doing that every single day is not going to be a smart thing to do. But I think it is important that we do incorporate it into our programming every now and then, so that when they do show up, you've got confidence to know, okay, I've done handstand push-ups and snatching in the last 7 weeks. I know I can handle this. Because certainly for me, I know when I haven't done that kind of stuff and I see it show up in a workout, I know I can do the movements in isolation. But if I combine them, I start thinking, oh, I actually don't know how my shoulders are going to feel after doing straight handstand push-ups and then trying to snatch a heavy load.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I think you nailed it. I think just don't overdo it again. Expose yourself to it, dose it enough for you just to understand it, to maybe get an adaptation here or there. If you sucked at it, maybe do it again one more time, and that's about enough. Yeah, there's too many things to work on that you can't just smash one thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to our fourth tip, which is prioritize recovery. So what I think about this, and I think where a lot of people go wrong, is we know that when January rolls around, most training programs that start talking about this is like our open prep cycle.
Yeah.
And so because of that, not only does the nature of the training change, we're going to put more intensity, more metcons into the programming, but a lot of people's mindsets change as well, which they should do, right? They start becoming a little bit more focused. They start to push themselves a little bit harder. And what starts to happen is that when you start to increase the intensity of your workouts and the output, the amount of energy you put into your workouts, what is happening there is that you're asking a lot more of your body to try and recover from that, right? So if you increase the intensity or the volume, increase anything, it's harder for your body to recover from that. And so what a lot of people do is they increase the volume and they increase the intensity, but they don't increase the amount of recovery work that they're doing outside the gym. So you can imagine that's now creating this kind of, lopsided scale where you're doing all this extra work, but you're not doing extra work to try and recover from it. And that's often why people end up, picking up injuries, getting sick before the CrossFit Open, or just feeling burnt out by the time the Open rolls around. So what we need to recognize as people who are on this journey is you need to ask yourself the honest question is like, if I'm going to increase intensity and volume, do I have enough resources and reserves to be able to recover from that? Maybe you're someone who, has a work schedule that requires you to only work a couple of hours a day, which means that maybe increasing your training volume and intensity and not having to do any extra recovery is going to be absolutely fine because, your general level of well-being and stress overload is pretty low. But if you're a busy individual, which I think is most people who do CrossFit, they have busy lives outside of it, whether it's social or professional, and then suddenly they start cranking things up in the gym and they're not doing things outside, that's where we typically reach the tipping point. Our buckets start to overflow really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So my reminder to people is always, if you're going to increase your work in the gym, you've got to increase your work outside of the gym. And that's things like sleep. It's, making sure you're getting good nutrition in, making sure you're trying to manage sleep as well as possible, consistent sleep schedules, getting sunlight, making sure you're hydrated, warm-ups, cool downs, massages, saunas, ice baths, all those things. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad you put it in that order, because a lot of the time when people hear the word recovery, they immediately go to, okay, what am I not doing? And then it's like your saunas, your ice baths. I need to get some like extra mobility work in there, which is all great stuff, but it's not stuff that you're doing already. Like, look at the stuff that you already do. Everyone sleeps every day. Everybody eats, everybody drinks. You can just manipulate those things first. Those are your lowest hanging fruit, so to speak.
Easiest things to change as well.
Exactly, because you're doing it already. So like, just have a look at those things. If you're already, nailing that every single day, then for sure, look at the other smaller things that you might be able to incorporate. But again, there's a financial burden. There's another time element to it as well. Maybe not the best bang for your buck. So like, look at the things that we know we have to do and we know we already do. So your sleep, your nutrition, like you said, sunlight exposure, stepping outside, getting movement in the day, that sort of thing that you're already doing, and don't overcomplicate it. Like I said, if you're doing it already, then look to the other things.
So for you at this point in the season, I know you said it depends what the season's going to look like as to how much energy you put into the Open, but do you typically change anything? Like, do you notice, do you up the ante with your training in terms of intensity, and are you stepping up outside as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, as an athlete who is getting older as well, there's only a finite amount of resources I have. I'm not like a 21-year-old spring chicken anymore. I can just walk in and just start snatching and start clean and jerking and muscle up straight away. I still can for some things, but a lot of things need a lot longer to warm up for. So resources are finite. And with that in mind, it's like, okay, when it comes to this time of year and I need more output from my body, like the first thing I look at is, okay, my daily schedule. I'm lucky now at Coastal Fitness in the process that I have a pretty routine schedule. It doesn't mean I'm out at the gym at 5 o'clock every single day. I'll be here tonight until just after 7, and that's fine because I know my timings. My Thursday mornings I'll have off, so I can, it's all kind of down, and I'm okay with that, and that should stay the same through the Open and through the season, really. The thing I do now, because I'm conditioning, doing a little bit more conditioning now, I'll probably up my carbohydrates, and that's from, I've had almost 15 years of weighing and measuring my food, and I still weigh and measure my food now. So I'll start to bump up my carbohydrates now that I'm doing more energy system work. My protein will generally stay the same, might increase it if I'm feeling like I need to. Fats will stay the same. Hydration will go up. Electrolyte goes up. Sleep is prioritized for sure. If I can get my sauna and stuff in, then I will, but it's not the be all and end all of it. Most of it comes down to my nutrition and my sleep. To be honest, those are two main things.
And with regards to sleep, what are you changing, or what are you focusing on?
So I actually just started the Today Well Spent journal. Last night I started it actually, and I'm not great with my phone in the morning and before bed. Although this morning I'm glad I checked it because my client cancelled on me. So I'm glad I checked it in that 5-minute window before it. But yeah, I think previously, if I didn't have something coming up the next day, I would just sit on the sofa until like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night for no reason at all. I'm not necessarily even doing anything. A lot of the time, I'm just watching something on TV. So now just being a bit more strict to myself, because even when I did watch TV until 11 o'clock, I was actually tired, but I'm like, well, you know what? Screw it. I got nothing coming up the next morning, so I can afford to do this. Actually just keeping to a routine. And the reason I'm like kind of think about it now is because in Phuket, when we were there over Christmas, I still went to bed like 8:45 to 9:30 every single night. A bit antisocial with the family there, but you know what? At the end of the day, who cares? It was better for me. So being a little bit selfish, but yeah, I felt great. Every day I felt great. Woke up at the same time as I would when I'm at work. So like 6 o'clock every single morning. I was up, felt energized, felt good and ready to rock and roll. So keep it the same as best as I can and don't change anything. So even day to day, weekends, weekdays, try to keep it as routine as possible. Some people it works, some people it doesn't. I think for like A-type personalities, it does. It's a bit easier to implement and just easier to hold throughout. Of course, people with families, animals, and kids and all that sort of stuff, it might be difficult. Work is difficult sometimes. But as best as can, try and stick to a schedule, make sure my sleep's the same, make sure my nutrition is dialed in. Yeah, those are my two main things.
Nice. Love it. Okay, let's go into our fifth and final piece of advice, which is adjust your schedule to suit the competition schedule. What does this mean to you?
I guess we touched on it before. If you're doing the CrossFit Open, like you said, at Coastal, we run a massive morning on a Saturday where we run like heat after heat after heat, class after class of CrossFit Open workouts, which is a great atmosphere and it's an awesome time. Often a lot of our coaches want to join that to be a part of the community. So in that case, if you're not doing those Saturday sessions where it's really, really hard, like a hard intensity, but also like chaotic in terms of people being around you, all that sort of thing, you need to basically get used to that. Your body needs time and it will adapt quickly, but it needs at least a couple of weeks to be able to adapt to whatever that day is. So if you're coming off a rest day, which often for a lot of people in CrossFit is a Thursday, and then they do the hard workout on Friday or the Friday night lights, for example, we got to get used to that. So if you normally wake up on Friday morning, you feel sluggish off a rest day, then you're going to be doing a hard open workout at that time, then something's got to change if it's not for you. If you normally still train at that Friday morning slot, but you think maybe doing the open workout on Friday afternoon is going to be better because I feel more energized, now's the time to change your training session to that afternoon slot. Similarly, maybe you change it from a Friday to a Saturday or Saturday to a Friday, whatever it might be. It also might be if you are someone who really, really does care about the open, which is totally fine, even if maybe you're not going to be in the top 1%, whatever that means right now, but you still maybe you butcher your first attempt, or you do your first attempt, you're not quite satisfied and you want to try it again, it means that you need to be able to be ready to do that again. So let's take the wall. Let's take it like the dumbbell snatch, burpee, box jump over one, because that's quite like devastating on the body. It's 150 snatches you got to do, and a lot of burpee, box jump overs. That's not something that most people can bounce back from in even the 3 to 4 day turnaround. So being able, or at least being mentally and physically ready to be able to do something like 150 moderately heavy hinging repetitions, and then back that up again on your redo day, if that's a Sunday, a Monday, or a Tuesday, at whatever time you would, and then repeating those sorts of movements again. Doesn't have to be a dumbbell snatch. It could be a dumbbell clean and jerk. It could be a deadlift. It could be a Russian kettlebell swing. It could be a full kettlebell swing, whatever it might be. But you're, again, replicating that sort of movement, that sort of pattern, but also that sort of volume as well, to be ready to be able to do that again. So hopefully when 3 weeks of the Open does come, if you do that on week 1, which would crush a lot of people, at least you're ready to rock and roll and do it again, because you're going to do 2 attempts at the Open.
Yeah, I think that's a big part we probably haven't mentioned so far with all these changes and recommendations we make to intensity and schedule, is that the athlete who does this well and does it in advance is typically able to function better during the competition. And if the competition was different, let's say it was a 2-day event where you're doing 3 workouts a day, the athlete who has taken themselves through a similar routine, and maybe in simulation weekends in the weeks leading up to it, are typically going to be much more prepared on the weekend. They're going to be able to handle the volume and the intensity of the workouts. And this is where you typically see in things like the CrossFit Open, a lot of athletes who haven't prepared adequately get to week 3 and they already feel like, oh, I'm done. I don't have the energy to give towards this final workout. And they either drop out at week 2, or they're not able to kind of turn in a good performance in week 3. We saw it even more when the Open was 5 weeks long. Most athletes would get to about halfway, and I think the drop-off rate was something like 30 to 40%.
Week 4 and 5, just
people who just don't even bother doing the workouts anymore, just don't have anything to give. But you'll always see that the most resilient athletes and the athletes who are prepared best are still able to give, world-class performances in the final weeks. And that's not just because they're fit, but it's also because they have prepared themselves to be doing 5 weeks of really hard workouts, or in this case, 3 weeks of really hard workouts, even with potential repeats, 1 to 2 days after the workout. So I think that's really why we're saying this is important. And if you're not an elite athlete, and most people listening to this podcast aren't trying to get to CrossFit Games, but most of us would love to do the CrossFit Open, have a great time with our community, push our bodies to somewhere close to their maximum, but we'd also like to transition back into everyday life and be able to get back to training and our activities and our social life and our, be able to execute at work. That's really important. That's what I think of a lot. And so I know that if I prepare myself better for the CrossFit Open, I'm going to be able to finish the Open, be able to bounce back to normal life without any real difficulty. I know, because I've done it so many times before, especially in recent years, that when I don't prepare for the Open, I put my body through 3 weeks of really hard workouts. I finish the Open and it takes me months sometimes to feel optimal again. Just because, I just didn't prepare my body for it. So that is really a big part. It's not just about performance. It's about returning back to normal life and avoiding things like injuries, burnout, and illnesses. Like, the better you prepare, the lower the likelihood of you experiencing those things in the Open.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. I think just to wrap all this up is talk a little bit about what we're going to do with the process programming in the next few months. It's going to be a pretty busy time of year for us. During the Open, we're going to be running the Process Open Throwdowns. That's going to be a little competition that we do every year using the CrossFit Open workouts and all the different divisions, and we run it for the Process Program community. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be doing update shows each week, kind of highlighting great performances from our community across the world, whether it's in our affiliates or our online subscribers. So we'll definitely be sinking our teeth into that. We'll be putting out strategy videos each week. So shortly after the Open workout comes out, us as a coaching team, or members from the coaching team, will do a head-to-head. We'll then do some live commentary on it, give you guys who are watching, as much valuable insight so that you can go and crush your Open attempt. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that. And then, of course, once the Open finishes, our Live, Perform, Compete, and Elite training programs will be taking a week off, or a taper week, a deload week, before we start prepping for the 25-26 season. But we also know that we're probably going to have quite a lot of athletes who are going to be marching on to the next round, whether it's in the age groups or, is he in individuals in the semifinals or teams? So we're going to be starting separate training tracks once the Open is done for the athletes who qualify, so that we can ensure that you're getting programming that's going to get you to be at your best for when your competition arrives.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
Nice, Dan. Well, I'm looking forward to doing the Open again this year. This will be my 12th, 11th or 12th, I think.
I think it's, somewhere in there.
11th to 12th.
I think I got my 11th badge last year.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
So best of luck to you, Ant, and best of luck to everyone tuning in who's doing the CrossFit Open. I think it's an amazing thing to do and put yourself out there and challenge yourself to do hard things. You will absolutely, no matter what level you're at, learn something about yourself through the process. And I hope you guys found this podcast helpful. Before we say goodbye, here's one crazy statistic for you. Did you know that almost 40% of people who listen to the show don't actually subscribe to it? Now, I didn't think that was a big deal until I actually learned about the power of hitting subscribe. For you, the listener, you get to stay up to date when we drop episodes on a weekly basis. But for us as a podcast, it really helps our visibility and helps us attract great brands and great listeners to help grow this podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode or you're a big fan of the show, please do us a massive favor and hit subscribe. Thank you so much.